class, this video recording is for lesson 6 of biochemistry, which is about proteins. Proteins, the molecules which will yield amino acid upon hydrolysis, are called proteins. So hence, amino acids is actually termed as the building block of our protein. So pag sinira si protein, ang mai-yield natin daw is an amino acid. Proteins are natural polymer of amino acids. Again, the number of amino acids present in a protein molecule may range from 2 to several thousands. So this depends on the type of protein itself. Protein molecules contain nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these four are the major structural components of our protein. So again, that is nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these four, once combined, will yield protein molecules. Proteins are the basis for the major structural components of animals and human tissues. A good example is our muscles. So our muscles is made out of mainly proteins. So they act also as a biological catalyst, or known as enzymes. They can also form structural parts of organisms, as mentioned above, participate in different cell reactions, act as a molecule for immunity, and also provide fuel. So basically, proteins have many different functions as mentioned here. So when we are classifying proteins, first we can classify them according to its structure. So first we have the simple proteins, the conjugated ones, and derived proteins. Simple proteins, those which give one amino acid only upon hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is yung pagsira. So once daw na sinira ang isang simple protein, this will yield one amino acid only. So that's why it is considered simple. Then for the conjugated proteins, those which will give an amino acid plus a non-protein group upon hydrolysis. So ito naman, merong dalawang components. So conjugated, it has an amino acid plus a non-protein group. Then next is you also have your derived proteins. These are a combination which is derived from simple and conjugated proteins. So those are the three major classification of proteins based on the structure. So, pasok tayo sa simple proteins. First, we have here your albumins. Globular proteins is insoluble in water, and it can be diluted in salt solution. This can also be precipitated by saturation with ammonium sulfate solution. It is coagulated by heat, and it can be found in plants and animal tissues. These are proteins found abundantly in both plants and animals, and upon hydrolysis with enzyme, this will yield alpha amino acids and their derivatives. So a good example of albumins we have under your blood, which is the serumbumin. Under your milk, we have lactalbumin, and the egg whites of albumin, lentils, legumelin, in kidney beans, as well as in wheat. So all of these are good examples of materials where we can derive your albumins. Next, we have your globulins. Globulins is soluble in neutral diluted salt solutions, but not in water. It can be coagulated by heat and can be precipitated from their solutions by half saturation with ammonium sulfate and complete saturation with sodium chloride. So good examples of globulins we have under your blood, we have your serum globulins. Under your muscle, we have your myosin, and in potatoes, which is also a good source of globulins, which is in the form of tuberine. We also have Brazil nuts, in hemp, and in lentils as well. Next, we have your glutalins. These are soluble in dilute acids and alkalines, but insoluble in neutral solvents. So good examples are glutamine, which is found in wheat, and orizinin, which is found in rice. So here are the good example of glutalins. Next, we have your histones. Histones can be found in your thymus gland, pancreas, and nucleoproteins. This is soluble in water, salt solution, and diluted acids. However, this is insoluble in ammonium hydroxide, which is a base. This can yield large amounts of lysine and arginine, which are types of amino acids, and combined with nucleic acids within the cells. So these are your histones. Histones is soluble in water, diluted acids, and alkalines, but not in diluted ammonia. This is not readily coagulated by heat, and it is strongly basic and occur in the tissues in the form of salt combinations with acid substances. So mainly histones is found as a combination with acid substances like in the form of heme of the hemoglobin. So here are your good examples, like in the globin that is found in your blood, especially your red blood cells in the form of hemoglobin. So there is a combination here of an acid substance na heme. We also have your thymostone and scobrone, which is found in mackerel. Another simple proteins, we have your scleroproteins, which is found in connective tissues and hard tissues. Fibrous protein is insoluble in all kinds of solvents, and it is very resistant to digestion. It is soluble in water and neutral solvents though. Examples here, we have your keratin, which is found in the epidermal tissues. You also have your elastin, which is found in your ligaments, and your collagen, which can be found in the hides, in the bones, and your cartilages. Next, we have your conjugated proteins in the form of nucleoproteins. So good example of this is the cytoplasm of the cell. You also have the nucleus of the chromosomes and ribosomes, and also good example are viruses and bacteriophage. So conjugated proteins, as mentioned earlier, these are made out of protein molecules combined with a non-protein group. So kung simple proteins nyo is just an amino acid itself, this conjugated protein is made out of the protein molecules or the amino acid, which is also combined with another non-protein group. So conjugated proteins such as your nucleoproteins, this contains nucleic acid, nitrogen, and phosphorus. In its name, nucleo and proteins, pinagsamang nucleic acid and protein. So tama tayo dun sa ating definition kay conjugated protein na isang protein plus a non-protein group such as nucleic acid. It is present in your chromosomes and in all living forms as a combination of protein with either DNA or your RNA. Next, another conjugated protein, you have your mucoprotein, which is a good example is the mucin that is found in your saliva. And under egg whites, we have the ovomucoid. Proteins combined with amino sugars, sugar acids, and sulfate. Si nucleoprotein kanina, it is combined with nucleic acid. Mucoprotein naman, this is now a protein which is combined with sugars. Okay, sugar acids and sulfate. Next, you have your glycoproteins. Still under the conjugated protein, glycoproteins can be found in your bones, such as the osteomucoid. You can also have the tendons and cartilages. Containing more than 4% hexosamine, mucoproteins. If less than 4%, then it is under glycoproteins. So still under the conjugated proteins, you have your phosphoproteins. Good example of this is the casein, which is found in your milk, and the ovovitaline, which is found in the egg yolk. Phosphoric acid is joined in ester linkages to protein. So those are your phosphoproteins. So may proteins ka and phosphoric acid. Yun yung non-protein group under the phosphoproteins. And then we also have your chromoproteins. These have the prosthetic group joined to the protein molecule. So ito naman po, aside sa may protein, ang non-protein group naman ito is a prosthetic group. Good example is also casein that is found in milk and vitaline which is found in egg yolk. So here is a summarized table of the different types of conjugated proteins. So here are the classes plus the prosthetic group. Prosthetic group is the non-protein group and its specific example. So as we have mentioned earlier, like for example is your hemoproteins. The prosthetic group here is the heme, which is the non-protein group. And the specific example is the hemoglobin that is found in your blood. And hemoglobin, as you all know, is the carrier of oxygen inside the body. Then you also have your lipoproteins, which is ang prosthetic group niya is the lipids or fats. Then good specific example is HDL, low density lipoprotein, and HDL, which is the high density lipoprotein. And then here are the glycoproteins, which is the prosthetic group is a carbohydrates. So good example is your gamma globulins, the mucin, and interferons. You also have again your phosphoproteins, which is a prosthetic group, or the non-protein group is a phosphate in the form of, for example, glycogen and phosphorylase. And then the nucleoproteins, nucleic acid prosthetic group, good example, are those that is integrated with the DNA and RNA, such as in the cases of ribosomes. Then metalloproteins, prosthetic group, of course, metal ions in the form of ferritin, and then zinc, which is under the alcohol dehydrogenase. Okay, so next classification, we have your derived proteins. Derived proteins is derived from simple plus conjugated. So good example of a derived protein is your proteins. We have your edestan, which is from elastin, and myosin. It results from short action of acids or enzymes. And please take note that your proteins are insoluble in water. Then you also have your proteases, intermediate products of protein digestion. These are soluble in water and not coagulated by heat. It is precipitated by saturated ammonium sulfate and result from a partial digestion of protein by pepsin or trypsin. Next, aside from the different kinds of derived proteins, you also have your peptones. These are intermediate products of protein digestion. Same properties as proteases except that they cannot be salted out. And it has a smaller molecular weight than proteases. So those are the major differences of the peptones versus your protease. Next, we have your peptides. These are intermediate products of protein digestion. This contains 2 or more amino acids joined by a peptide linkage, hydrolyzed to individual amino acids. So upon hydrolysis, these peptides can be individually segregated into our building blocks na amino acids. Okay, so aside from the classification based on its structure, we can also classify the proteins according to its biological significance. So we have first your transport protein. By the way, when we are saying it is classification according to biological significance, it means that this is a classification based on its function in the body. So first example is your transport protein, which carry or circulate small molecules and ions. So when we are categorizing a protein which is under a transport protein, in its name, transport, siya yung tagapag-ikot, siya yung taga-carry from one place to another. Good example is your hemoglobin, which carries our oxygen from the lungs to our other tissues. Without hemoglobin, hindi tayo mabubuhay kasi nga, ang pinaka-main function ng hemoglobin mo is to carry the oxygen to the rest of the body. And then we also have your serum albumin, which distributes fatty acid between fat tissues and other organs. So those are your transport proteins. We also have next is the storage proteins. In its name, this can store different kinds of molecules, small molecules and ions. Good example is the ovalbumin, which is used to store amino acid used as a nutrient by chicken embryos found in your eggs. Then we also have your ferritin, which is otherwise known as the liver protein, and this stores iron in humans and other animals, which is a main source nito is your liver. We can also categorize it under contractile protein, which is the conduction of nerve impulses, muscular motion, and coordination of motion. So that is contractile proteins. A good example of this are myosin plus their muscle protein, which is responsible for muscle contractions. Then you also have your structural protein, which will provide mechanical support and structure. Good example is the collagen for mechanical strength of our bones, and keratin, which is found in your hair. And then you also have, of course, your protection proteins, which are the natural defense proteins. And good example of this is your antibodies. So once your body is fighting off an infection, our body will tend to create antibodies. And these antibodies are actually forms of proteins. And then you also have your catalytic proteins, which is used to catalyze biochemical reaction. By the way, when we are saying catalyze, this means hastens the chemical reaction. So sometimes kasi, ang chemical reaction will not take place without a catalyst or yung magpapabilis sa kanya. So yun yung isa sa function ng ating mga enzyme, to catalyze biochemical reactions under, again, catalytic proteins. And you also have chemical messengers, which is hormonal action. A good example of the chemical messengers, of course, are your hormones, internally secreted compounds that affect the function of other organs and tissues when transported by the body fluids. That's why some of your organs function kasi merong hormone na nag-uutos sa kanya na, uy, ganito yung gagawin natin. Okay, so without these hormones, those kinds of organs which are stimulated by hormones cannot function well. So almost all compounds in the body, of course, are protein in nature. Okay, so additional na classification of our proteins is according to the conformation or the shape of the protein. So first we have the fibrous, which is a polypeptide chain that are arranged tightly parallel fibers and sheets. So tightly yung arrangement, parallel. Ganyan. Okay, forms the structural framework of our body. So most of the structural framework of our body is a fibrous protein. And take note, these are insoluble in water. Which is, ang good examples natin, you have your collagen, which is the most important protein in human connective tissue. Take note though that collagen is insoluble in water but may be boiled to form a digestive coagulate protein called gelatin. Okay, so yung gelatin nyo in itself is actually a type of protein. And then you also have your elastin, similar to collagen but cannot be converted to gelatin. Good example, formed in your arteries, ligaments, tendons, and in the dermis of your skin. Then we also have your keratin, which is insoluble, indigestible fibrous protein, which is the major component of hair, nails, and your feathers. That's why yung hair natin and of course yung nails is medyo matigas siya. Keratin po yung responsible doon. And then you also have your globular protein. So ang globular naman, in its name, ang shape nito is spherical or parang pabilog. These are polypeptides arranged in compact spherical forms. That's why globular ang tawag sa kanya. These are soluble in water. And then good examples of globular proteins, we have your antibodies and your enzyme. And then also there are certain shape naman na mix. Resembles fibrous protein in terms of strength. However, yung shape niya can also be a globular protein. That's why it is considered as mixed.